Hello, my name is Alyssa. Um, we will be discussing my topic today, and it is how does sex education impact public health? I was really passionate about this topic and it was very fun to research, so I hope you enjoy my presentation. To begin, we're just going to give some background on the history of sex education in the US. After World War I began in the early 1900s, many soldiers were beginning to suffer from STIs. So those included gonorrhea, syphilis, and venereal disease. Um, After that, the sex education that was implemented focused on strict religious morality. So it focused on abstinence until marriage, and it was extremely limited, the sex education that was taught. Lessons were administered in appropriate classes. So if you were speaking about sexual anatomy, that would be taught in a biology course. In the 1940s and 50s, they did begin exploring the psychological implications of sexual development in youth. So they did implement home economics classes where they discussed the family unit, marriage, money management, cooking, etc. And then in the early 1960s and the 70s, there was a pro-sex movement that was ushered in. It's referred to as the sexual revolution. And there they started to get really body positive. They started moving away from the religiously motivated perspective of abstinence, and wanted to empower themselves by making their own reproductive choices, as well as deciding when and with who to have sex with. So there was pro-sex establishments that were made, and then birth control actually did become legal nationwide during that time as well. So after that, the movement was challenged very abruptly by the AIDS epidemic that started in the early 1980s. So after that, the conversation surrounding sex education, it did refocus itself on abstinence and religious morality, just in hopes of people. They believed that homosexuals were the only way that it could be spread. So the religious morality kind of goes hand in hand with the anti-sex until marriage movement, and then of course not having sex with the same biological sex. So abstinence programs, they do teach that abstinence from sex is the only morally acceptable option for youth. So they lack medically based information about consent, sexuality, sexual abuse, condom, and contraceptive use. They teach that this is the only way to prevent unintended pregnancies and STIs. So they don't discuss contraceptive methods or condom use. This information is from the Kaiser Family Foundation. And then Fox et al. Estimates that the federal government has spent nearly $2 billion in abstinence programs since the mid-1990s. And despite the amount of funding that these programs have received for such a long time, research has concluded that states where abstinence is stressed, females actually experience higher rates of unintended pregnancy, while there are lower rates of teen pregnancy found in states where abstinence is not emphasized. And the same goes for STI transmissions. So comprehensive sex education, it does promote essential life skills, and it encourages kids to form their own values. So essential life skills, that would include critical thinking, communication, negotiation, self-development, decision-making, assertiveness, accountability, and empathy. Values would be open-mindedness, respect for others and themselves, positive self-image, non-judgmental attitude, and positive attitude towards their sexual and reproductive health. These programs can also include refusal skills, and those can reduce the likelihood of sexual assault during college. Another thing that I did want to add that I forgot left off the slide, comprehensive sex education, it is not anti-abstinence. They do discuss abstinence as a perfectly valid, and appropriate choice if that is your choice. They just do not teach that it is the only choice or that it's the correct choice, and they certainly don't frame it as a moral obligation for you to do so. So they do cover abstinence, and that is highly encouraged if that is your choice. Comprehensive sex education programs, they increase the use of contraceptive, they delay the age of initiation, they decrease likelihood of sexual assault, and they decrease rates of infection. So These programs, they also provide accurate information on sexual and reproductive rights, information to dispel myths, and references to resources and services in the local community. So, sexual violence statistics. One really big piece of why sex education is a public health issue is because sexual violence is an epidemic in America, and many people suffer from it. In fact, every 73 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. So it is really something that can help mitigate sex crimes, and something that we should really be investing in, so that we don't have this pain inflicting our communities anymore. So among cases of child sexual abuse reported to law enforcement, 93% of those perpetrators are known to the victim. So only 7% are strangers, 34% are family members, and the 59% are acquaintances. So this includes family friends, teachers, coaches, peers. Those who are highest risk are age groups from 12 to 34. 82% of all victims under 18 are female, but that does not mean that boys and men are not affected by sexual violence. In fact, 1 in 53 boys under the age of 18 experience sexual violence at the hands of an adult. Sexual violence can have long-term effects on the victim and the victim's relationships with their families, friends, coworkers, etc. So 79% of survivors had been further victimized by a family member, close friend, or acquaintance, which caused increased distress and problems at work or school. So, and sexual violence happens everywhere: military, prisons, churches, homes, etc. It can happen anywhere, and one way to mitigate that is teaching everybody the same standard, expectations for consent and boundaries as the next person. So an estimated 80,600 inmates each year experience sexual violence while in prison or jail, and 60% of those sexual violence cases against inmates, they are perpetrated by jail or prison staff. So like I said, sex education across the board is really, truly important for everybody, and the more standardized that it can be, I think the more consistent our results will be with mitigating sexual assault. So how can we support comprehensive sex education? Now that we know that it's important and that it does affect public health, how can we advocate for it? So if you're a parent, you actually have a lot of wiggle room. You can help at home using reliable resources or other online sources. And it does decrease adolescent birth rates, rates of unplanned pregnancy. It can mitigate sexual violence. And it should be an important issue for all American voters. The implementation of these programs, it would decrease sex crimes and leave children feeling more control of their bodies and ready to respect others' bodies as well. So if you are a parent, you can help your child's sex education by talking to your children or teens regularly throughout their lives about a broad set of topics related to sex and sexuality. So those could be healthy friendships and relationships, personal safety, boundaries, consent, positive body image, sexual health, and where to find reliable sexual health information. So another thing you can do if you're not a parent, you can find out what the laws are in your state. So if they are comprehensive, contact your local school district to make sure that they're being enforced. If they're not, or they don't exist at all, maybe tell your local representatives that you would like better sex education laws in your state. And then finally, you can go to your local school board to make sure, or to figure out what sex education looks like in your community schools. So one thing that you can do related to that, you can organize with friends or local advocates to demand quality sex education policies and programs in your school district. So there are many things that you can do, but most importantly, it's just your actions and what you decide to say to a victim of sexual assault or about sex in general and relationships. You do always want to advocate for the most medically accurate form. But this has been very fun for me to research, and I hope you liked it. Thank you.